I'm here in Los Angeles talking to Per Hüttner. Nice to meet you, Per.
Likewise.
And tell me about your practice. You've been at it for a couple of decades now.
Yeah, I'm actually celebrating, it was exactly 30 years ago this year that I made my first, organised and participated in the first exhibition.
Yeah.
So that's cause for celebration, I guess. My practice is a little bit odd, and I do find it hard to describe it. I'm trained as a visual artist. I started being trained as a printmaker, moved into sculpture pretty much immediately when I started art school. Done a lot of photography, done a lot of video, done a lot of installation, and I guess what there are two red threads that run through it. First of all, formally there's virtually always been a sort of a performative aspect to it. And secondly, it's dealing with relatively basic metaphysical questions. So it's the emergent relationship between the self and the surrounding world. So those are the two things. That everything else is pretty much up for grabs. A lot of collaborative projects as well throughout the years.
And how has that manifested itself differently from when you started? You were saying that you essentially started off as a sculptor.
Well, it's hard to say because it's been a long and winding road. I mean, I started in the late 80s and early 90s. I started working with medical scientists, and that's something that's also stayed throughout my practice. It started being relatively gallery based, even though I worked with a very interesting English guy called Chris Dorset, and we started making, or he'd already been at it for quite a long time, making exhibitions in non-art museums. And that's also so that's something that I've always found interesting is looking at new formats for art and also new venues to present art, so that art can meet new audiences and also challenge itself.
So you've never been really tied to a medium anyway?
No. So I've always been coming and going in different medias and different contexts. And I think that for some people that comes across as being unfocused, but I think that because where I started with these two things, that it's very much about these metaphysical questions and also this relationship to performance. I think that there is a very clear continuity to it.
And at the core, what are the metaphysical problems that you're addressing?
Well, everybody knows what it's like when you wake up in the morning and the sun is shining and the world smiles at you, so you smile at the world, and the more you smile at the world, the more it smiles back at you. And how that changes that day, and the following day you wake up and it's raining, and you hit your big toe against the side of the bed, and it's a slippery slope, and you're being grumpy and everyone's being grumpy towards you. So I guess that what I'm trying to grapple with is how, when you change as a human being, the world changes with you. And it becomes increasingly interesting over time, because I see that the world changed, but I also see that I've changed a lot, and it becomes very difficult to see which is what. So there's always an entanglement of these things, and I feel that I go deeper and deeper into this, and it becomes more and more interesting the further along the journey that I go. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I wonder if, because if you've been practicing for that period of time, if what the issues and the questions are, if that has developed, I mean, it will have evolved over that period of time, because I think that the way that we perceive of ourselves within the world, I think, changes over the period of our lives.
I think that just understanding what the question is and being able to formulate it has taken me an awful long time. I think that it's a very annoying question to ask. It's not there's this beautiful, I try to remember the name, there's this beautiful black and white interview with Francis Bacon, and the interviewer, who's this famous art historian, I can't remember his name, they're both smoking and he's sort of lying in bed, and Francis Bacon says something along the lines of, well, I present the world pretty much the way it is, and people don't like that. And I think that asking metaphysical questions is a very annoying practice, and it's not something that people necessarily want, because it makes life more complicated. It makes life more difficult, but it also makes life more interesting. So it's one of those. And I think that I don't know, because of the context of this interview, I'm asking myself whether that is a modernist thing or whether, but Western civilization at this point in time where we're at is obsessed with comfort and convenience and simplicity, and I think that asking metaphysical questions in an intelligent way sort of pulls the rug under that whole thing.
Yeah, and yes, we were talking just before the interview about the way in which there's a kind of a widespread discontent that coincides with that as well.
Yeah. Been working and been having a dialogue with an English. He's technically speaking a historian called Theodore Zeldin. I don't know whether you're familiar with him. And he talks a lot about the importance of conversation and how having meaningful conversation can fill our lives with some kind of meaning. So when you talk about the way that you phrase it, it brings back he's obviously a lot more eloquent in the way that he describes it, and very, very much to the point. The first time I met him, he scared the living wits out of me, because he asked very, very direct and very scary questions about what is it that you want in life, and why you're doing this and that. So.
which are normally kind of very intimate questions, aren't they? The sort of questions that you'd ask someone, after a few bottles of wine, after knowing them for a couple of years.
Yeah, and I think that that's also what he wants. I think that's what he's getting at, is that these questions are important and they need to be asked, and I think also one of the things that he keeps returning to is that having a conversation is a skill, and it's something that we need to practice. And that's something that I learned relatively early in art school. There was a colleague who by chance was living in Paris at the time, and she was like, I was complaining, I was sort of saying, yeah, we don't have any meaningful conversations here, and she immediately said, well, do you start them? And I was like, okay, wait, hey.
Yeah.
So that was probably some 25 odd years ago, but it's something that stuck with me. It's like, if you want to have a meaningful conversation, you better start it yourself.
Do you think that is the function, not to reduce it down to function, but that is what your work is doing. It's engaging in a visual and performative way in creating meaningful conversation.
Well, I mean, it's kind of truism, but it's like art is about raising questions rather than giving answers. So I think that any art is a little bit like whatever Aristotle said, that he wanted to be the little caillou, the little sort of stone in the sandal, and I think that art functions a little bit like that, and it is the itch that you can't scratch that is the starting point for good conversations, I think. You were talking about drinking wine, having so I think that it's paradoxical in certain sense, because eating well and drinking well and enjoy having a comfortable setting offers a good platform for raising uncomfortable issues. So
yeah, that makes me think that we were, like I said, with the conversation that we were having before, we were talking about the way that the Western world, and particularly the United States, is these days, and going back to that sense of discontent, but also a sense of stress. I think that is pervasive in what should be a comfortable Western society, and I wonder if that sense of stress is actually about diverting people's attention from asking the uncomfortable questions, which are the deeper kind of questions about the society and the culture that we live in, and the way that functions and operates.
Yeah, I think so, because the thing is that in my mind, the sort of capitalist machine, society, whatever it is, it's extremely well oiled and works incredibly well, and that's also its Achilles heel. It works so well, and we're so focused on relatively superficial aspects, and we're all nobody's innocent. We can't get away from it. It's not like I'm saying. But it does take away the focus from the issues that are important in life, and that also gives, I think, quality to our short existence on this rock. And I think that we're kind of all a little bit ADHD in that sense, that we're like, I need to do that, I need to, rather than sort of saying, well, what is it that is important to me? What is it that gives meaning? So we're chasing all these, as a word for that, chasing, what is it that? Dream sounds like, you're chasing your dream, which I think that chasing a dream, I think, is something that can be incredibly productive, but we're not chasing our own dreams, we're chasing dreams that have been manufactured for us, and I think that's maybe a part of the problem. And there's so many of them, because there's this battle for our attention the whole time.
And those dreams are often around acquisition of possessions and wealth and other unattainable things that the system in which we live in is actually set up for us to never achieve, because we want to. It's all about desire, isn't it, and anxiety.
Yeah, but it's also, they become increasingly ephemeral, I think, because it's also, because I travel a lot in my practice, I'm subjected to the tourist industry, and the tourist industry then have chosen this, so it's like the perfect setting to relax, and the relaxation in itself becomes like a full-time job, and you need this and you need that, and it's like, but just walking up the mountain, or sitting outside in your garden and watching a square foot of grass, you'll find amazing, and wonderful things. We had the great pleasure of working with a local artist here called Brittany Ransom, who works with insects. And what we learned about insects working with her was just mind-boggling, and opens an entire new world, and they're everywhere. Termites, ants. So I think that no matter where we start looking, if we look close enough, we're going to find wonderful and amazing things, because this rock has been around for 4.1 billion years, and life has been 4.5 billion years, and life has been there for 4.1 billion years, which offers an incredible richness and variety and beauty. And I don't think that however advanced our iPhones or whatever digital things, they will never be able to reach the same level of intricate and yet simple beauty.
I find this is something that I oscillate between when I think about things on that kind of scale myself. I find that I'm horrified by the way that the environment's been destroyed so quickly, and the way that global warming has been politicized and people debate the straightforward facts. And at the same time, a friend of mine who's also an art academic a few years ago said to me, it's very arrogant of us to think that we're destroying the planet, because even if we destroy it to the extent that it'll wipe us out, it'll just come back in the same way as it did 65 million years ago when the asteroid hit.
Yeah. And I think this is one of the interesting things of coming back to modernism, is that what we the way I tend to think about it is that there are you have Darwin and evolution, and you have Freud and psychoanalysis, and then you have Einstein, and through him Heisenberg. So you have these kind of three characters. But I try to remember what the name. There was a I think he was Scottish geologist who, and Darwin read him because in the mid 19th century, people really thought that the Earth was 6,000 years old. And I think he set it back to around the time of the Cambrian explosion, so 550 million years. And I think that's one of the interesting things about modernism, is that it's kind of it's perpetuated this idea that actually the history that we look at is basically since ancient Greece and forward, while in looking at deep time changes completely that perspective. So it's paradoxical, because modernism seemed to both have revealed or made us ready for deep time, and at the same time kind of pushed it aside. So that's one of those paradoxical. Usually, in my experience, when we talk about modernism, it's full of paradoxes and very creative paradoxes, and that's one of those things that I think is an underlying, or two underlying movements that sort of oscillate. That tends to be forgotten, and that's also with this sort of social media driven world. It seems that already sort of thin or relatively unhistoricized context has become even thinner. So the that's difficult to say in English. Historization, I don't quite. It's very, very important.
Yeah. I was about to say it, I'm kind of like stomach. Historicization.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
It's very important, and it's putting things in perspective, both in geological deep time, evolutionary time, but also to go back and look at history of humanity and try to learn from it. And it is one of those things when we were traveling in Arizona and talking to Native American artists who are working, it becomes very clear how Western culture and its sort of imperialist agenda is just relatively simple-minded, and how much knowledge there is around, which is of course going back to Levi-Strauss and anthropology. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so interesting for me to come to the New World, because still that meeting is ongoing. You everywhere, as soon as you start to dig, particularly if you travel in Central and South America, the meeting between Western culture and indigenous culture is ongoing. It's not something that's died out.